So yeah, you're living the patriarchal Mormon dream in the order. You're a little bit unorthodox in the sense that you're working a part-time job outside the home. Although I don't know that that's totally unorthodox. I think.
Yeah, fitness.
I mean, no, in Utah, many people can't afford to live on a single income. So I knew growing up women who had daycares on the side or who sold essential oils or whatever it was at the time. Yeah. I don't think it's totally unorthodox.
Yeah. No, I don't think so.
But it's a little bit. But you're living the Mormon dream that's patriarchal. How does that affect intimacy between you, emotional and even physical intimacy, to the extent that you think it's relevant and worth sharing?
Well, I think that when I don't think I would have even used the name patriarchy. Well, I didn't even really. I couldn't have vocalized what patriarchy was until I started my new business, and that was about 3 years ago now.
Okay.
And that's really when things started to become. I started to feel like more aware of patriarchy. And again, I don't even know if I could have given it that title, but just. There were some challenges with really starting my own business that I don't really want to spend a whole lot of time on because there's so many good things to get to. But I don't know if I should go into when you got your calling. When I started my new business, it was a really busy time for our family. My business really took off. I was working a lot, but I was also doing everything at home. But it definitely added a stress. And it was sort of in the...
Let me ask you this. So why did you change careers?
Well, I didn't plan on doing a new job, but I purchased these products and I loved them. And I don't know if I am able to, how much I can get into detail with that. But I purchased these skincare products and I didn't plan on doing the business. It was never in the cards. But when I got in, I saw this is a fantastic way to empower women. It's a great business opportunity. It fell in line with what I had done as a doula and as a fitness instructor. And I thought, I'm going to run with this because I really feel like I can bless people's lives in a meaningful way. And so I did. And I started working my business. It's direct marketing. It's Rodan and Fields. And I started growing a team. And it was interesting because I started to observe some differences between some real interesting differences when I was working with couples or women in the church versus out of the church. And then also sort of seeing how those themes were in my marriage and just starting to evaluate, wait, this doesn't seem quite right, or this doesn't seem quite healthy, or this doesn't feel quite right. That seeing a lot of guilt and shame, right? A lot of guilt and shame and a lot of kind of just things that weren't very healthy maybe for some of the women who were members who were participating in this, and myself included. And it was a time of a lot of growth where I had to decide, am I going to sort of do the comfortable thing here, religion-wise, marriage-wise, or am I going to not give in to the criticism, even sometimes coming from home? And so it was a pivotal time where I decided, and I remember I sat in the car in this little white church and I was just sobbing.
Okay, wait. I want to bring you back because I think this is a really important part of the story. So for 16, 17 years, you're doing fitness. Mm-hmm. You try some skincare products, mm-hmm. and you not only get excited about the product, but you get excited about the potential to impact women.
Yes.
So you sign up to quit the other job?
No, I was doing both.
Okay, so you're mm-hmm. doing the fitness thing, mm-hmm. but then you're like, oh, I can sell mm-hmm. these products too, and make a little money on the side or whatever? Well,
no, it wasn't really about, it was more like I can empower women like my mom. My mom was a single mom. Like there's a real amazing way that I can help women, and I have a heart and a passion for that, to do something to where they can be present in their lives and also earn money. So that was really that was very compelling to me.
Okay, so you start doing this new job, mm-hmm. and you're still doing the old job. How does the commitment build, and then how does the tension build? Go ahead and get into that. What is the job starting to require that's different from the past 17 years before? And then how does that start impacting the family?
Yeah. So, I mean, first of all, it's untraditional, right? So there's, whether we're in the church or not in the church, there's some uncomfortability of that with Cody and with me, like putting myself out there and doing something that's untraditional. It's something that many people poo-poo or look down on, you know what I mean?
What's hard about it? What's untraditional about it?
It's direct sales. So people feel like it's, there's something like evil or dark or bad. People have all these ideas in their head. It's actually it's what I think can be a really phenomenal business model. But there's a lot of objections that come up because of fear or stories people have told themselves about this line of business. So a lot of people say, well, we don't do this kind of thing. You know what I mean? We don't do this we don't do this kind of thing.
It's kind of like old times Amway, New Skin, doTERRA, Young Living. It's all that kind of thing. Is that right?
Ish. Yeah.
Okay.
Ish.
Which is just basically, who are your friends? Who do you know? What are your social networks? Selling through that instead of a company exclusively relying on ads or, radio spots or TV spots or, magazine ads or whatever. It's direct marketing. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Generally. That's generally.
And that stresses out or causes discomfort in the marriage. How and why?
Well, it's uncomfortable to me in the beginning to do something new, and it's uncomfortable for Cody because it's just more of me, right? That needs to be a little taken away. And there's some sacrifices. Maybe the meals aren't quite the same. And I don't think Cody minded so much that, but it was more that now, maybe I did need to go on a weekend trip, or maybe I did need to be gone for the evening. And that was new. It was new for us. And at times it was challenging for me, and at times it was challenging for Cody. But it was within that context that I started to really see, well, if I started to really see that there was some huge differences between what was acceptable for me and what was acceptable for a man. In more like a man can do anything, I felt like, but
because by this time you're about how old?
3 years ago.
Okay, so it's 3 years ago. You're in your early 40s. What?
Late 30s.
Late 30s. Mm-hmm. And Cody's done with med school. He's now fully working at a hospital, doing the legit doctor thing. You've settled into your new life in Columbus. Still very faithful, but something's different. Now all of a sudden you're wanting to spread your wings and fly a little bit, career-wise. You're primarily motivated by this desire to help women, which is deeply rooted in your own emotional drive because of what your mom experienced and what you've experienced. So it becomes a passion for you, right? Like a mission. And so it starts to put stress on the marriage because you're going to need to be gone more, or things won't be quite as buttoned up as they maybe had been previous.
Yeah. Okay. I would say that.
Okay.
And then at the same time, what happened is Cody was called in to be. Is there anything you want to add to that?
I would just say that my perspective was, here we are with a very full plate. Leah has a very full plate. I have a very full plate. And we're putting a substantial something else onto the plate. And when you do that, something has to come off the plate to make room for it. So what comes off or what changes? And that's where the rub was. It was, like Leah said, I've always believed that Leah's her own woman. She's her own person. I think it's great that she has passions and desires above and beyond mothering and being a wife. And I truly feel like I've always been a fan of that and supportive of that. And this was a little bit different. I was supportive of this idea. It was more intense than anything that she had to that point, tried to do. And certainly my vision and understanding of the opportunity for her in the beginning was not, wasn't what it is now and wasn't what it was for her at that time. She saw greater and better things than I could foresee.
Yeah.
Okay. So as you start experiencing that tension and you start noticing the difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And we could spend I mean, I could go into that. But yeah, I mean, I started realizing, I mean, the reason my plate was so full is because I was taking care of everything around the home and the kids, and those were all my responsibilities. So that was why it was full, because we have 4 kids and they all have needs and wants and desires. And my primary role is tending to all of that. So to make space, and the home and things like that. So to make space for me to have a separate part-time passion or career, that was just very, very challenging, because it was full. And sort of in this time where my business was growing really quick, and we were just sort of trying to readjust, right? And there was tension because of that at times. Cody gets called in and we get called in. And he's called to become the young men's president. And I would say that's where the story begins, really. I mean, there's all this stuff that we've talked about. I really, as I look back now, I can see that's, I think, really where the unraveling begins for me. Because I'm sitting there sobbing, just thinking like, we have so much going on right now. And if this calling is from God, that doesn't make sense to me, because he knows that we're like trying to, like, it's a really hard time for us. Like, there's so much on our plate. It's a really hard time. I'm sitting in there sobbing, and I'm like, in that moment, I'm going like, this, I don't think God called Cody to this position. Because this would be the worst thing for our marriage right now. The worst thing that could happen right now is for him to be gone more than he already is. And and some things had changed in his work. His boss had passed away. There were extra pressures on him at work. He was doing all the scheduling. He works very, very long days. So he's home, when he's home, it's really, really precious and valuable time. And I knew that young men's leader means campouts and high adventure and weeknight activities. And I'm just thinking, how? Like, what about when are our children going to see you? When am I going to see you? And all this is kind of going through my head. And at the same time, the bishop is saying, I can see that you're distraught. And he was great. And he's like, I'm going to let you guys both work it out and decide what you want to do. But what is a Mormon woman to do? We are supposed to support them, and we will be blessed for it, right? So you're sort of caught in between a rock and a hard spot, because it's like, if I say no, I'm unfaithful. If I say no, he will resent me potentially. If I say no, I'm going to make him more concerned because I'm not being as faithful. If I say no, like, I can't, that's not an option to say no. And I'm not demonstrating faith, and I'm not, maybe what we need is for him to be gone more. Because if he's gone more, maybe that's somehow going to bless our family to be able to cope with more, right? So all of these things are kind of going through my head.
Yeah, it's a little bit like back at the, her first experience with the temple. She and we are all offered, the choice, but was it really a choice for Leah to support that calling from God in that moment, right? There really was only one dignified way to proceed in her mind, I think, is he was offering a choice and doing so graciously, and I believe that he would have accepted the answer no. But Leah didn't feel like that was an option.
Okay, so he gets the call, and then how do you guys handle that?
So he accepts the call.
We talked about it for a few weeks.
About it.
Did you ask him not to? Because Mormons don't turn down calls.
No. I couldn't ask him not to.
No, but we talked quite a bit about it. And in the end, she said on several occasions, I want you to do it. And maybe it wasn't a heartfelt, I want you to do it. But I would not have done it if she said, Cody, I really don't want you to do this. I would not have said, well, it doesn't matter, I'm going to do it.
I had a lot of hope, and I had a lot of faith. I really did. And I also felt like I couldn't say no. But I had a lot of hope that what the bishop said was true. I really believed that he was speaking truth when he said, if you support your husband in doing this, you will be blessed, your family will be blessed, your children will be blessed. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to put my faith into this. And I don't think saying no is not an option, because then I'll just feel terrible that I withheld what God wanted Cody to do, or what he may have wanted to do. And so we said yes. And that decision caused a lot of challenge.
Yeah, it was a challenge, for sure.
What way?
Well, like Leah was saying, we're both very busy, and I was excited about the calling. I had never served. I was excited and humbled and inadequate and all those feelings. Like I'd never served in the young men's presidency before, and now I'm asked to be the young men's president. I had no idea how to do it. I'm a father of daughters, right? I didn't do scouting as a boy, so I felt quite inadequate. So there was that sense of it, but there was a great excitement because we had and still have great youth in our ward here and great young men. Mm-hmm. So I was excited to work with them and to have the chance. I don't have any sons, so I was excited at the opportunity to mentor boys, mentor young men. So it was exciting and then hard all at the same time. Because scouting is at least has been a big part of the young men's program, right? And so I wanted to be a part of that. Well, that's hard when I'm busy all week long, and then there's a camp out Friday to Saturday, and unlike some of the other young men's leaders, I don't have a son in the troop, so it's not father-son time for me. And Leah and the girls are stuck here at home wondering why I can't take them camping, or why does Dad have to leave again? And I felt torn. I felt some angst between, well, I want to do my calling the best way I know how for the boys, and because this is what God's asked me to do. Yet I can see how it's taking me away from my family even more than I already had been away from them typically. And so there was a real struggle there, and Leah felt, I think, more alone and less supported by me. And I felt at times so frustrated because I didn't know what to do. I was just trying to do my best. I'm trying to fulfill my calling, trying to be a good father and a good husband. There's only so many hours in the day and in the week. And what do you do? It goes back to this, where are the priorities? God and family, right? Like at times I chose family, and I said, guys, sorry, you're going to have to go on this camp out without me. I can't go. I'm doing this. And I felt guilty. I felt guilty for having to say that, because I wanted to be the best I could for the boys. And at times I said to Leah and the girls, hey, I'm going to go do this with the young men. And it was, so there was a real struggle there internally for me. I loved it, and it made life more difficult all at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit complicated. We've struck another nerve with listeners. A lot of people are relating to what you said, to your story. Tammy writes, reminds me of when I was going through infertility, had just lost a baby, and they decided nursery was a good idea for her.
Yeah.
Juliet writes, they made me young women's president just before I started medical school, did it the whole first year. Julie writes, exactly what I thought when my husband was called to be bishop. This is the worst possible thing for our marriage right now, and all the same thoughts of how I can be myself and supportive at the same time. She says, love you, Leah. Gilda writes, makes me sad that Mormonism brainwashes families to think that you need a middleman to get a relationship with God. Tammy writes, it all goes back to women. They lose their voice in the patriarchy. And someone else says, so what the bishop was saying, if you don't accept the blessing, you're missing blessings, guilt. Kelsey says the guilt is so wrong. Casey writes, another prime example of an unhealthy aspect of Mormonism, the guilt and shame of not being able to say no, and also the stress burden that many callings place on families. Juliet writes, I was once overwhelmed by a calling that I walked out of church, left my kids with my husband, and walked 2 miles in my dress to get home and fall apart. I asked to be released, or my husband asked them to. I learned how to say no to callings after that. It isn't worth the mental breakdown. And this is kind of, it's a bit of a paradox, because part of what makes Mormonism succeed, what makes it so successful, is that everybody works so hard and is so committed, and they serve in their callings. And we all, you guys are grateful for your Mormon upbringing. I'm grateful for my Mormon upbringing. Absolutely. There were a ton of adults that made a ton of sacrifices. It probably wasn't always easy on their marriage. And yet they made these sacrifices because they believed in the church and the gospel, and they loved it. So that's the beautiful part. And we've all benefited from it. And the dark side is it can really wear on individuals' health, and it can wear on the marriage. And, you know, how do you navigate that, you know?
Yeah, and it's tricky because it gets to a point, like for Cody, it got to a point where he felt there was some resentment, right? Like I was feeling some resentment because here he is working all week, gone a lot, doing extra duties at home for work, and then he's also taking this on, and it's like if there was ever a time where I needed you, it was right now, where my business got so busy and I just had taken on something new. And so I'm feeling some resentment of him being gone, and here it's like I had lived that journey, right? Like 10 years of medical school and residency, 4 babies, and so I kind of felt like, like it's never going to happen. Like you're never going to be around. It was sort of that feeling of like, you've had high callings. I know the trajectory you're on, and this is only the beginning. And then he's kind of feeling some frustration and resentment towards me, because he's like, let me serve God. Like, this is what I've covenanted to do. And then I'm shamed. You know, I feel horrible because I feel like I don't want to get in the way of him serving God or us getting to the celestial kingdom. Like I want to do my part, but it's just the tension. And I remember sitting in my room one night after an argument that we had, just sobbing, just that feeling of like, I think he had said like, it was when it had really escalated, and we had that really bad argument, and he said, I'm going to do what I want to do, no matter what you think or say. And I remember just sobbing in my closet, just thinking, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to have a voice when it comes to things that really matter and be righteous. You know? How does a Mormon woman do it all? How does a Mormon woman do it all? You know, it gets exhausting, and feeling horrible for feeling bad about his calling, but feeling just like I really needed to have him at home sometimes, and just feeling his resentment towards me about being frustrated about his calling. It just was all so difficult. And it just felt like we were missing each other. It was like it just had gotten to a point where at times we just were really feeling like there was that wedge at times. And yeah.
So I can imagine in an Orthodox Mormon scenario that the conclusion in this scenario becomes, stop working, Leah. Like,
yes.
We have the plan. It's the woman stays home, and you're violating it. Cut it out. Give up. Go back to taking care of the kids full time. He's making plenty of money. Let him do his thing. Why wasn't that, why wasn't that, what made it so that wasn't kind of the conclusion that everybody reached?
Well, for me, it wasn't really, the business brought up some of the patriarchy, an understanding of that for me. But whether I was working or not, Cody was working. he was working very long hours. And so, Cody will have some weeks off here and there, but when he's working, it's long days. He's gone at 6, little after 6 in the morning and home hopefully maybe by 6 at night. So I don't know that had I not been doing the business, maybe the edge would have been taken off a little bit. Yeah, but the goneness is still... He would have still been gone, and that would have still been hard. And we had done that through residency, through the callings that he'd had, executive ward clerk and all this. So we'd done it for a long time. I just think with 4 girls who, Daddy, we want to go, like we've always begged you to go camping. Daddy never had time to take us camping. And now he's going camping with the boy. It's hard having all girls and having your husband gone during nights of the week, during the weekends, Saturday temple trips, all of these times without any of his kids. And these girls sort of feeling like, well, and then the girls start saying like, well, why don't we do those things, So they're starting to be aware of like, wow, the boys do a lot of things that we don't do. And yet they were always very happy to have Cody in the calling. I mean, they were never like, Dad shouldn't do the calling, But it did bring some things up for sure. And yeah.
But why not jump to the conclusion that you should just give up your job for the family? Just eliminate as much complexity as possible.
I just didn't entertain that ever.
Were you hoping? Was there a part of you hoping for that, Cody?
No.
Why not?
No. Because the further she got into the business, the more empowered I saw her feeling, and the more validation and fulfillment I saw in her life. And as I said, I've always tried to be supportive of her having passions outside of our home. And so that thought I can't recall it ever crossing my mind. And I don't think I ever vocalized that to Leah, but it was just not on the table. And so, yeah. So a year after I was called, I asked to be released.
He asked to be released, and he sobbed, and I felt horrible.
Why'd you sob, Cody?
Because I never turned down a calling. I never asked to be released from a calling. I always just wanted to do my best to serve the Lord. I loved the young men. Even in the year that I was with them, I learned to really love them and appreciated that time with them. And it was so hard. I feel like I was choosing between God and my family, and I didn't want to have to make that choice. And I felt so torn. There was real inner turmoil. It had wreaked real havoc in my heart. And we had some difficult times. It's not like that year was just horrible as a couple.
No, there were great times.
It did cause some strife, and there were some arguments over time and my commitment. But in many ways, that year was lovely, and it was lovely. And I just enjoyed it. And so to give it up and to I felt like I was letting the young men down. I felt like I was letting the Lord down. I felt like I was letting the bishop down.
And he had reached that. I did not make him give up the calling. Like
no.
He decided to do that, and yet when he made that decision, I said no, don't do it, because I felt so bad. But yet it's just like a no-win situation. Yeah.
For us. In that moment, it was the best thing to do. And the bishop was very gracious. He said, I went over, I met with him at his house and explained the situation. And he said, you're making the right decision. And so he was very, very, very good about it.
Yeah.
And Leah, you were getting emotional too. What was that about for you?
Well, I just felt so sad to be in the situation where I was feeling like, I need you and our kids need you right now in their lives. And yet I know you want to do this so bad, and I know that you've never had sons and that this fills your heart in important ways. So the whole time it was sort of like this, like, I want you to do it. I want you to do that. And then there's this other part of me that's like, but I need you and our kids need you. So it was like this, like, so when he came to me and he said, I'm going to ask to be released. It was like this, like, relief and also this, like, deep pain, because I know he was going to be so heartbroken. So it was just this interesting time. And then that kind of takes us up to the point where, and then he became back to gospel doctrine, like the best gospel doctrine teacher ever. He would spend hours preparing lessons, and so he got called back to that, and I was Relief Society teacher, and that kind of brings us to the point where it all came crashing down.
Okay, so what was the first? How did the Mormon dream turn into a nightmare?
Yeah. So, do you want to go or
No, go for it.
So my friend Nicole Wagner, she does Rodan and Fields as well, but she's not. She's not on my team. But she's LDS and her husband as well, and she's a convert, and she was someone who I saw as trustworthy and devoted. She had served a mission as a convert. The church really blessed her, and really, I mean, she's very open and honest about how it helped her in her life when she found it. And she was struggling. And just like I would try and understand anyone who was struggling, she was struggling in her faith. But she had said, my sister and my brother left the church 10 years ago, which hopefully we'll have time to talk about a little bit. But, they never talked to me the way Nicole talked to me. And
actually, go into that. So let's go back.
Okay.
So talk about Kelty. She's joining us, by the way.
Oh, okay. Hi, Kelty. So finally we're getting to this good part, which we're thankful for the viewers who have stayed tuned through the not as exciting part, or maybe applicable to them. So about 10 years ago, my sister Kelty and her husband Dwayne, who were just lovely, kind people of integrity and value, Dwayne sort of stepped away. There's a lot of parts of their story, but Dwayne began to step away from the church, and which was really difficult, for Kelty for various reasons. When there's one person who's questioning, and they kind of went through and they experienced all of that difficulty. And then Kelty eventually ended up leaving as well. But because of all of the fear that's at play, the fear of losing relationships, the fear of all the fears that's at play, we never really had a very transparent or open conversation about why she had left. She tried to bring it up with me apparently once, just about something small like Brigham Young, and I totally shot her down. I sent her articles, in the mail, Ensign articles. But I was also, I think, respectful, I think she would say, of her own journey. And she kind of would mention little things like patriarchy, but it was never something that she was very, wanting to share with me. Come to find out, that's because she knew how painful it was for her, and she didn't want to be the reason why we went through so much pain.
And this is something that is so maddening, and that borders on, I don't want to use the C word, but it borders in cult territory, because would you describe you and Kelty as being close growing up, or?
She's my only sister.
And well, sometimes that can mean you fight a lot and whatever.
Yeah, no, I would say we were close.
Okay. So these are siblings, only sisters who were close. Would you say you guys could talk about a lot of stuff, if not everything?
Yep.
Okay. And so not only is it sisters, but it's probably the most important thing that could happen to either of them in their entire lives, which is Kelty, who had married to Dwayne, who had, based her whole life on Mormonism. Mormonism was the most important thing. That was true for everyone. That was true for everyone in the family. Now she's losing her faith. Now she's completely terrified and sad and scared, and would want someone to talk to about it. Who would she think of to be the first person she'd talk to? Well, it would be my sister, because sometimes parents, aren't totally safe. And yet Kelty can't come talk to you. And I had the same thing happen. I had a faith crisis and I don't, this isn't a diss on my brother, but I went to my brother Joel's, one of the first people I went to. And this is back in 2001. We were both working for Microsoft. We eat lunch together, right? And he's like, I don't want to hear about this, So I did that. I wasn't as compassionate as Kelty. I just went straight to Joel, and he's just like, I'm happy in my marriage. We have 7 kids. Life's going good. I don't want to hear anything you have to say. That was his response to me. But Kelty's was one of compassion to you. But what's that like for Kelty to not be able to talk to her own sister about the most important thing in her life?
Well, I mean, she tried to test the waters. She tried to just bring up this little thing, I think, about polygamy once, many years after they had left. And I was like, we do not talk about that in my home. Apparently I said that. I don't remember saying that, but I did. So she had tried to test the waters a little bit, like, is this safe? Like, dip her toe in, and felt that it wasn't safe. But it's incredibly isolating. And at the time, her journey is so different than ours has been. 10 years ago, there weren't all these resources. There weren't, there's support groups everywhere. There's books. There's Mormon Stories Podcast. There's Mormon discussions. There's, 100 different there's all this help and this support. Now, wasn't her experience. She literally had no one but Dwayne. And for a time there, Dwayne and Kelty weren't on the same page. And, he had, gone to the dark side of not believing. And so that wasn't even safe, right? So, those are some really lonely times for her. And she would try and talk to stake presidents. She would try and talk to Relief Society presidents. She would try to talk to people. And of course, she's deceived, and just read your scriptures more and, pray. And she went through this time of she was serving in the temple every week. She was she really kind of tried to give it her all so that she could stay in. But, obviously the information just was such that couldn't work. But, it's a really sad thing. And I've really had to apologize. Cody and I have both apologized to them several times because they were on their own. And that's my sister. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we interviewed Stephen Hassan, who wrote a book about cults and combating cult mind control. He has the BITE model. Cults control behavior, information, thoughts, and they manipulate you through emotions. And you can see it at play, because I don't think the church explicitly tells people, if you have a faith crisis, don't talk to family, or it's not like we're all trained on how to cope with the faith crisis, because we're just kind of trained, to stay away from people who are dangerous and stay away from anti-Mormon literature. But there's not a training for how to communicate with family and friends in a positive or negative way. It's just never discussed. But this is just the outgrowth of Mormon culture, where we're not comfortable talking about it. But it's real. Behavior and thoughts and information is locked out of this Mormon bubble. Mm-hmm. And it's mind-boggling. So talk about, Leah, what it was like as you're watching Kelty and Dwayne separate from the church, and you too, Cody. What thoughts were going in your mind about them? How were you assessing or even judging their departure? And how did that affect your relationship?
Oh, well, for me, when you believe that there is only one path, there's only one true path, only one true church, and you're in it, and one of your tribe leaves it for a different path or a different church or a different way, there is no healthy way within the relationship with that person to analyze that, other than to come up with some sort of a justification, right? And there are several. It could, in this case, it was, Dwayne is just one of the smartest people I've ever met, and he's just so intellectual, and he just got too smart to be a member of the church. What is it? It is good that we be wise so long as we hearken unto the voice of the Lord, or whatever. So I figured, well, that's what happened to Dwayne. He got too smart and too full of himself. And
by the way, for those who don't remember or know, several years ago, the Johnson brothers were doing some, and they still are, I'm sure, but back then they were doing some very visible, important things within Mormonism. One of the Johnson brothers was doing the I'm an ex-Mormon videos. These are guys from Southern Alberta, Canada. One was doing the I'm an ex-Mormon, which recently were reshown on ex-Mormon Reddit. During the Church's I'm a Mormon campaign, one of the Johnson brothers, which one was it? Do you even know? Would have done the I'm an ex-Mormon video campaign, and you can see 10 or 20 of those. Chris. And they're very high production value, very high quality. Emily Pearson, Carolyn Pearson's daughter, did one. Several people did one. That was sort of one. And then the other Johnson brothers, didn't they do the word print analysis stuff where they...
That was Dwayne.
Okay, so Dwayne did the word print analysis stuff where he's studying the Book of Mormon and the writings of different possible contributors to the Book of Mormon, Joseph Smith, Hiram, Lucy, Oliver,
and different
Sidney
texts
Rigdon,
from that time.
And doing word print analysis to try and establish through scientific means that different parts of the Book of Mormon were authored by different people.
Yeah, and that's linked to the CES-letter.
Right. From the CES-letter. Were there other big things that the Johnson brothers did besides those three, or did I get...
I know that they would I once heard that they would go to or present at, I think maybe ex-Mormon conferences, and I would just be like...
Dwayne says it was Will.
Oh,
Will.
Okay. Oh, and they did the late war stuff.
Yes.
That was huge.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I interrupted
Yes.
you.
Yes. Well, that's the algorithmic stuff he did.
Yeah, when they discovered that there were these other books that had so much of the same linguistic patterns as the Book of Mormon, the King James English, the sayings and the phrases that came right of the late war and the War of Napoleon.
First book of Napoleon.
Yeah, and it just showed, and these are books that Joseph Smith would have had access to, and it totally demonstrated to many that, wow, it looks like the Book of Mormon very much could have been a 19th century document that came from material and sources that Joseph Smith would have had access to and would have been familiar with. And these were very important discoveries in progressive and post-Mormonism at the time. Now, I don't know, so I just had to give that aside. So Dwayne Kelty's husband was one of those three Johnson brothers.
Yeah.
And so that's the Dwayne and Kelty we're talking about. So anyway, you were saying Dwayne.
So we're unaware of all of this.
Oh yeah, we have no idea.
We have no idea.
Which in and of itself is bizarre, right?
Dwayne had mentioned to me that he was involved in this project, analyzing ancient texts and connections to the Book of Mormon, but I just didn't get it, and I was so unaware of all of that side of
the whole
of Mormonism.
So
to back to your question, though, I think what it did...
Okay, wait, I just have to do this.
Okay.
So Kelty's setting us all straight. So Kelty says, Will did the I'm an ex-Mormon video. Dwayne and Chris did the algorithmic study of the Book of Mormon.
Okay.
Chris also did the video series. And then Dwayne, it was Will who did the ex-Mormon videos. And then Chris presented at the ex-Mormon conference about the late war and the first book of Napoleon. Anyway, I'm just trying to make sure the right people...
I think it's Chris. He has a YouTube series that was really helpful for me that sort of puts up...
That's the video that she mentioned.
Yeah, what's it called? It's called My Faith Journey, My Mormon Faith Journey.
Okay.
Anyway, look in the comments if you're watching, because that was really good, because it sort of took Jehovah's Witnesses, because it was so unsafe for him to deconstruct Mormonism. So he sort of put the focus and talked about confirmation bias and programming, but through the context of Jehovah's Witnesses. That was really helpful for us in the beginning.
And it's mind-blowing that your sister's husband and brothers were doing all this monumental public work, speaking at ex-Mormon conferences, and you're completely oblivious to it all, which will be what many people are. You'll do this interview today, and they'll be very close cousins, aunts, uncles, friends, and family that never learned that you did a video, even though it's publicly available. And it's just part of this BITE model. It's behavior and information and thoughts somehow being locked down in a Mormon context.
And even with my sister and brother going through this, I still was all in, and not even I don't, it's fascinating to look back and realize hindsight is amazing, And you can see the control.
So you were saying you started, Cody, to think Dwayne was a little bit too uppity, a little bit too intelligent, a little bit too learned.
Well, he's wrong, right?
And you're a doctor, by the way, so it's...
he's wrong, right? Because I'm right. If I'm right and he's not with me, then he's wrong. And that's, you know, in very gross terms, that's how we were thinking, right? Mm-hmm. They are misled, deceived, whatever label you want to give it, and there's plenty of them, and we've been given similar labels now. That's the unhealthiness of it, is that type of orthodoxy and literalism, like this is the only, means anybody else is, generally speaking, mistaken. And that creates, especially within family, it does create some degree of distance. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was real. And that is what we felt the need to apologize for, is that we allowed for years that distance to be there because we didn't feel comfortable or safe enough or willing to
or
ask
like
why
you
or
don't
understand.
Want to offend them because you know you're right, and you know there's just all this stuff that prevents people from having conversations that should happen.
And so how did the relationship change over time with your sister and with Dwayne?
Well, I mean, I was always like, again, I was raised by a mom who said love, you know? And so I was always like, you know, it's cool, it's okay. You know, we love you.
And Kelty happens to be like the greatest aunt in the world to our kids.
Yeah.
So they adore Kelty and Dwayne.
So you didn't contemplate removing access
never
of your kids from Kelty?
No.
Okay, because some people do.
Yeah. But no,
It's like, I'm not comfortable you being around me.
And part of that was because they were so respectful. We knew, without even having a conversation, that they wouldn't take the kids aside and try and teach them something.
No, they were always...
And that was smart. That was smart of Kelty and Dwayne to be strategic about that, because relationships over dogma, right? Either way, right? Yeah.
It was always, they've
been very gracious throughout the whole thing.
They've been so wonderful. And even as we've apologized, they're like, it's okay. Like, we understand. We were there, 10 years later. So, but what was different is Nicole was like, Nicole didn't hold back, she was very direct with her communication, which I am super grateful for, and she was using words like brainwashed. She was using very strong terminology, and I'm like, this is so odd.
Nicole was.
Okay,
so now we're fast forwarding back to...
So now we're going back to Nicole. So what happened is...
This was December.
1 year ago.
December 2017, and at this point, we are all in.
We are all in.
Right? We're doing the program the best we know how.
There was that little hiccup with the calling. It was tenuous and difficult at times.
But now Cody's released.
He's teaching the best Mormon doctrine classes on the planet. Everybody said so, because he would take so long to prepare the most amazing. He was really, really good. And I'm teaching in Relief Society, and sometimes making people uncomfortable because I might say Heavenly Mother periodically. But anyway, for the most part, we're doing our callings. Our kids are all in. It's BYU, it's the temple, it's every summer we would take the kids to BYU, and this is where you're going to go to school. Young Women's and EFY were the best weeks of Brinley's life. Early morning seminary, straight A early morning seminary student Brinley was. So last December I said to Nicole, I knew she was struggling with some things, but I'm like, how are you doing in relationship to the church? And she just kind of told me. And I'm like, Nicole, this is so weird. Why on earth would you be feeling like that? I'm just like, this is so weird. I trust her. I know she loved the church, and she's saying things that are really bizarre that I've never heard before.
Like what?
Like, we've been brainwashed.
And why didn't that just make you hate her and run away?
No, because I'm like, well, I need to understand. You're in a lot of pain. I need to understand why you're in a lot of pain. And the only way for me to do that is to try and understand how you've come to the conclusion that you're leaving the church and you're in pain. And I've done this with a lot of people. This is what friends do, right? A good friend says, I care so much about you. I want to learn about you. If you're hurting, I want to know why you're hurting. It was not a pattern that was unfamiliar to me. It was just what I've done in many relationships. So I'm like, okay, it's silly to comfort someone if you it's a little empty to say, I know how you're feeling, if you don't, right? So she's like, you need to read the CES letter. So I'm like, great. Okay. No problem.
You didn't feel scared?
No. Why would I? The church is true. And I mean, the prophets say the church is true, and the prophets say that, you know, like everything will point back to the truth. And I was actually like, you know, it would be so great for me to strengthen my testimony, because we'd had that experience with Cody and his calling, and I felt like I really needed to just dig in and strengthen my testimony. So I'm like, this is great. Like, I'm going to help Nicole, and I'm going to strengthen my testimony, you know? Sorry, hang on one second.
That's okay. No, keep going.
Hey, B. Brinley, just head up to your room until we're ready for you, okay? So, hi. Just head up to your room. So I read the CES letter. I mean, I didn't stop reading the CES letter. So I read the CES letter. It's like
now, had you ever heard about anachronisms in the Book of Mormon? Have you ever heard about polyandry? Had you ever heard about the Book of Abraham?
No.
You know, this is December 2017.
Yes.
Like Mormon Stories had been going for, you know, I don't know.
We knew about you. I'd heard of you. I'd heard of Mormon Stories.
I'd heard of your name.
Through Kelty. Yeah.
One night when I was feeling super awful and Cody was calling, I looked up and watched you, you know, when you were excommunicated, and I watched that video, and I was like, that's so weird. He seems so nice, but I think that people think he's really bad. And that was just like weird. But anyway, no, I knew nothing